We want Mara. We want Mara.
You are Locked On UCLA, your daily podcast on the UCLA Bruins. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to this edition of the Locked On UCLA Podcast. I'm your host, Zach Anderson-Yoxsimer. Thanks for making this show your first listen each and every day. It's free wherever you get your podcast, and it's available on YouTube. Like, comment, subscribe. Thanks for your support. This episode is ready to rock and roll, right? We're ready to rock and roll. It's your team every day, and the Bruins are coming off a big win against Wisconsin. Absolutely huge win. Now, what do the Bruins need to do to continue the success, to trend their way upward into a better seed, a better draw for potentially making a deep run in the NCAA tournament? I've had high expectations from the start. I've seen some of the best from this team. I know we've had a very rough 2-week stretch with this team in the middle of January, beginning of January, but I still don't think there's any reason why this team can't go as far as they can, which I think is the third weekend of the NCAA tournament. Now, it might come down to rotation. It might come down to a little luck in the draw and just making big plays in clutch moments, which almost every March Madness run tends to have outside the last 2 years from UConn, which has been utter dominance, even though you could say maybe luck of the draw was UCLA getting hurt. Whole other discussion, whole other argument. What we're discussing and arguing here is the merits of Aday Mara playing more minutes. So let's take a look at what Aday Mara's production is right now. Mara, the 7'3" Spaniard, who in 8 starts in his freshman year, hasn't had any in 18 games this year, doesn't even play 10 minutes a game. He missed the last game against Iowa, where the UCLA Bruins utterly dominated the Iowa Hawkeyes. Comes into this game averaging 9.8 minutes a game. He maybe scores 5 points a game, and that's including his outburst against Wisconsin. And then Mara comes in, gets 4 offensive rebounds, shoots a bunch of free throws, makes the majority of them, which we know has been a struggle for UCLA. It was an impactful force on defense. Now, he's not going to be as impactful, I could think or say, as William Kyle, but that's where not only just Mara, but the impact and importance of William Kyle stepping in as well. Those two need to provide a post presence UCLA has not had in their first few games. They just haven't, or the first part of the season, really. This team is designed by Mick Cronin to have good point guard play. He really wants to lean on Dylan Andrews and use the shooting ability of Sky Clark. When it doesn't like one of those two, bring in Sebastian Mack to change it up. Have Kobe Johnson come in, guard, hit a couple of threes, score some points, be the Energizer Bunny as a defensive threat that can get steals at any moment. And then if none of that's working, Lazar Stefanovic comes in, can splash some threes, do just about everything. Oh, hey, let's see Bilodeau, Daly. Those are two hardworking, great top-tier efforts for the UCLA Bruins. Those two guys average close to 26 points per game for the UCLA Bruins. But they're not supposed to play small for 32 minutes of the game. No. Cronin is supposed to be able to go small. UCLA is supposed to play Daly at the 5, although he's played Bilodeau at the 5. So it's supposed to be Daly, or Bilodeau, Daly, Johnson, Clark, and Andrews, but not for 40 minutes. That's how this team can win. Now, if your team's successful and dominating, yes, you can ride those 4 or 5 players, change a piece or two here and there. But what UCLA has needed and lacked, and has been thoroughly exploited through the beginning of Big Ten play, has been post presence, interior presence in the paint, post defense, and some of that has to do with William Kyle being out due to an undisclosed medical issue and having surgery, and probably not being 100% for the Michigan game and ready for those experiences early. And then Mara not even playing in one game. UCLA dominates, and then he's the focal point as to why UCLA wins. We see the fans. We want Mara, and he should play. He needs to play. UCLA can get at least 3 easy buckets a game at minimum out of Mara. UCLA should be generating 7 to 10 points out of Mara because he's so big. And yes, there's going to be some nights where, okay, he's not strong enough to make a nice move, but he's long enough to go around. And when all those hook shots are going, especially the left-handed ones that Mick Cronin doesn't like as much, he says Aday Mara is elite with the right hand and okay with the left hand. But if he's making shots, blocking shots, making his free throws, he commands at least 10 to 12, 15 minutes of the game. Now, the debate can be, do you want to start him and get off to a good start, get him in the post, feed him, or do you bring him off the bench where your second five is Sebastian Mack, off hard attacking guard, who you hope is a good lob potential. You throw it to Aday Mara, and you get either a good attacking guard mixed with a post player, and those two things could work. Maybe they don't. But Mara needs to be saved, I think, for longer stretches. So maybe you don't necessarily start him. But keeping him under 10 minutes against most of these upcoming matchups could be criminal. Now, maybe you say, all right, Wisconsin's bigs, they're not physical. They hit 15 threes, and you put in a big man with a little finesse. That's not going to work against some of these teams where you need strength. Okay, that's where William Kyle III comes in. But these two players are the two guys UCLA has recruited or developed either through the portal or in the offseason or during the season to be the center. And Cronin was worried about how this team would play at the five, which is why I thought William Kyle III would start. I thought he would defensively, and then you bring Mara off the bench. Could still work. That's not where they're at the moment, but they need production out of the five. It doesn't need to be 20-5 or 20-6 in the key block every time, but they cannot get mauled in the paint every single game and expect to succeed in the Big Ten and go deep in the NCAA tournament. Michigan's got 2 7-footers. Other teams will throw out size. UCLA barely beat Arizona, and that team was missing one of their big 7-footers. North Carolina was a team in a game where they didn't have a lot of size. And who could have helped in that game? Well, if Aday Mara was a guy that was feeling as confident as he was now, UCLA certainly doesn't lose that North Carolina game because they can feed the big man for more buckets. All right? What was one of the uglier games UCLA's played earlier this year? 2 of which I could say. You play New Mexico, you put Nebraska. I can't say Nebraska's big men are the best in the world, but Mara should have been able to get more points, more minutes. I thought he had a good little stretch there against Nebraska. He was clearly impactful against Gonzaga. And when you've seen these games against big teams where UCLA has struggled, against tournament teams, quad 1, quad 2 teams that are going to make the tournament, or slated to, UCLA struggled or had gone on big runs when Mara's come in and was impactful, like Gonzaga. Or when UCLA struggled with size all around New Mexico, which just amplifies the need for Mara to get stronger. Doesn't need to go 7 for 7 every game, but he should get at least 5 post touches with him aiming to go for a shot. And sometimes we've seen teams double team, he kicks it out, and that's when UCLA has to hit the 3. Mara must see more minutes. I'm not going to say he demands 25, 30. He's not in shape. Remember, he had a slow beginning to the start of the season because he had an off-season foot injury. So we're like, why didn't Cronin start this guy earlier? Well, Cronin repeatedly said he had a foot injury. All he's been doing is lifting. And maybe now, while most of the team is maybe hitting a wall or getting through that wall in lull in mid to late January with travel and conference play starting, the new quarter starting, he's probably starting to pick up his steam, hit his full stride now that he's getting there. And William Kyle comes in. He's a transfer, maybe more of a raw product than Cronin anticipated, but comes in defensively, deals with a little bit of a medical issue. Hopefully he's fully recovered from that and gaining ground. If those two players only get better from here on out, that changes or puts UCLA back into that picture of what Cronin had. These guys at the guard position, these defensive stoppers, rebounders, scorers, and oh, by the way, I can go small and I can go big. But he hasn't been able to rely on the players being big. Now, confidence and momentum is a huge thing. So is scouting and tape. And now that teams have tape on Mara and proof that he's done it and Cronin can now go to it, how can he do it now that teams are going to expect it, potentially, for 10 to 15 minutes? That will tell us more about how UCLA can execute. But there should be no reason that UCLA does not go back to Mara, maybe to a lesser extent, but still quite a bit in these next few games, and establish they got a 7-3 center and he should be getting the ball, even if it's off the bench. And he should be scoring, getting at least 10 points, just because it's so easy for him in the paint with most of these matchups coming up in Big Ten play. There should be no reason why anything else happens. Speaking of the NCAA tournament, I was reading an ESPN article. Is UCLA more likely to get in, a bubble team? Or are they a lock? We'll talk about that next. This message is brought to you by PrizePicks, the place to get real money, sports action. Over 10 million members and billions in winnings. PrizePicks has changed the game in daily fantasy sports. It could be playoffs, it could be regular season, but PrizePicks has made it easier than ever to win big while enjoying all the football action. Now it's playoff time, and there's no better way to get in on the action with PrizePicks. All you have to do, choose 2 players and pick more or less on at least those 2. If your picks hit, you can win up to 1,000 times your cash. That's right, 1,000 times your money just by choosing a couple of picks. Maybe this week you want to put your money on Josh Allen having a big game. Or you're like Travis Kelce, maybe he's going to get some support from his super big fan club. See if they're going to go more or less, or expect the cold weather to play a factor. Go check it out. And with PrizePicks Flex Play, even if your picks don't hit, you can still win double your money. And with the app, you can get your money fast within 15 minutes. Run your game this football season by downloading the app, using the code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's $50 just for playing. Don't wait. Take your game to the next level with PrizePicks. PrizePicks, run your game. All right. So I was reading, Joe Lunardi updates his bracketology. UCLA currently sits, I think, around a 9 seed, dropping a little bit. And that was before UCLA beat Wisconsin, another quad 1 win. So UCLA is actually under 500 in these quad 1 games. Because remember, it's easier to play a road game against the top quad 1 game. And by easier, I mean the analytics stretches it to be like top 50, top 75 for quad 1 road games. While home, it has to be a much smaller window. And those rankings fluctuate based off how the teams do during the season. And UCLA, with a string of losses on the road, those have turned into quad 1 losses against teams that are, in some aspects, on the bubble, like the Nebraskas. But you dominate in Iowa, who a team was in the last 4 in and now firmly out after the last 2 losses. That probably gives UCLA a really good chance to put themselves firmly in the field. I was reading an analytic article written in ESPN about, okay, let's see where the bubble teams are. How many teams are expected in the Big Ten? The Big Ten Conference, at the moment, is slated for about 11 to 12 to maybe 13 teams. Right now, it's probably safer to say double digits, leaning 10, potentially 11. And if you look at some of those teams, UCLA probably stacks up with the eye test. But the one thing is they don't get 2 cracks at these teams other than the Big Ten Conference Tournament. And how much can we weigh those conference tournament results? UCLA right now has stacked up a decent amount of quad 1 wins. As much as they have sometimes had some ugly eye test losses, you mix in the travel, you mix in everything else, UCLA doesn't have any unforgivable losses. They have some crushing losses. But the Bruins don't have an unforgivable loss. They didn't just go at home and lose to Southern Utah earlier this year. They didn't lose to Fullerton. They didn't go and get walloped by Iowa at home. If UCLA had lost to Iowa at home, that would have been turn off the season, turn off the TV, just drop the bandwagon. No, they were bounded, not only won, but did dominantly. And Iowa can be a solid team, but the Bruins are playing that game at home. It's not like going to Iowa City and playing that game. It's not the same thing. It is not the same thing. So I was reading it, and UCLA, I think, has better than a 75% chance of getting in the field right now. But that's how the next few weeks can go. UCLA, this is a crucial West Coast stretch at home. You play Washington and SC. And those can stack up as quad 2 victories for the Bruins because those are on the road, one more emotional than the other. Playing Washington for the second time, which will be the first and one and only 3 times this year. UCLA will play somebody twice in the regular season, the Washington, Oregons, and USCs of the world. Everybody else, they get 1 chance. So when you host a conference leader like Michigan State heading into Pauley Pavilion, well, hopefully we can get a big crowd, a big energetic fan base, and hopefully things outside of the campus and outside the greater Los Angeles area have died down. And then that one can be hyped. Because if UCLA, you win these next 2 games, then all of a sudden, Penn State, Michigan State, those are some big games. Penn State kind of floating around the bubble. But if you beat Washington, hopefully, and they should, now that you mix in a big man with Washington, whose biggest and best player stands more 6'9", and he does 7'3", I think that's a good matchup for Mata to exploit. USC, well, that's going to be a new battle at USC with their new head coach. That brings new emotions. Andy Enfield tended to get the better of Mick Cronin. We'll see how that new rivalry emotion with Kobe Johnson going back to the Galen Center will rev up the Trojan faithful, I would assume, at least whoever's there, sellout crowd or otherwise. They're going to throw a lot of nonsense verbally, probably on social media too, at Kobe Johnson for him going across town to UCLA and becoming this de facto leader and somewhat captain in the locker room that Mick Cronin wants him to become. So those are some emotional old Pac-12 legacy rivalries. But winning one of those 2 next games, winning that Michigan State game, and these next 2 games could practically solidify them in the field. That would be 5 quad 1 wins, put them at 16 wins total, 4 to 5 wins on this West Coast swing. Iowa and Wisconsin already in the bank. You go at least 5-2. That's just saying you win 3 of the next 5 games. That's huge. And okay, maybe I'm banking too much on UCLA being a really good Michigan State team at home. That has looked dominant against some other Big Ten competition. And I mean, absolutely dominant. UCLA is still more than likely, greater than 70% chance from this moment forward to make the tournament. The Wisconsin game was an absolute big one, huge one. Another quad 1 win, back and forth, and I think proved to the UCLA locker room they can win different types of games. And they hadn't been able to get up there scoring-wise, play enough defense, or make the stops in those higher-scoring games, and saw teams pull away late, kind of like the Rutgers game, or outscore them late, like the North Carolina game when things were getting out of control, when UCLA had a huge lead. But now UCLA can have it. They've won a game in the 60s, they won a game in the 70s, and they can win a game in the 80s. Maybe they haven't won a game in the 70s, but the higher the score goes, UCLA be like, hey, we can feed it to our big man. We can hit threes. If teams aren't missing, we have still found a way to win. Now, you're not always going to be able to ride the home crowd or just the travel aspect of it. But now as UCLA grows with this season, they're looking like a tournament team and a contending team to at least get to the second weekend, break everything good, and get better. But to become a Final Four worthy team, get better on defense, especially guarding the 3 and shot defense. And how can you get your bigs activated more? It doesn't have to be the same one every game, but Kyle and Mata must be involved, whether it's a big defensive day, rebounding, or as Mata had it, didn't miss a shot and was very important on the offensive side, having a career high offensively with 4 offensive rebounds and some key blocks. He does that every game. He's a stud for the rest of the year. He does half of that, and UCLA is way better if he just does half of that consistently every game. Every game, you get that production from Mata, 10 points, a block, a few boards on the offensive glass, leading to more second chance points, will completely change UCLA's ideals of going forward. All right. Next, we'll talk about the UCLA football spring schedule a little bit, and we'll wrap up this show here on Locked On UCLA. Therapy is a game changer. It can help manage stress, improve sleep, and communicate more effectively. But finding the right therapist and fitting sessions into a busy schedule can be pretty challenging, and that's where Talkspace comes in. Talkspace is the leading virtual therapy provider, and can you get the help that you need easier, more accessible, it's affordable. And with Talkspace, signing up simple. Match yourself with a licensed therapist that fits your needs, usually within 48 hours. That's super convenient. You have this sessions from the comfort of your own home, and you can even message your therapist between appointments. Talkspace is covered by many insurance plans, and for most insured members, there's a $0 copay. That's huge. $0 copay. That's not any extra charges you got to pay to go to your therapist. And it's never been easier to prioritize mental health. As a listener of this podcast, you'll get $80 off your first month with Talkspace. When you go to Talkspace.com/LockedOnCollege, enter the promo code SPACE80. With a licensed therapist today, you can get matched on Talkspace.com/LockedOnCollege and enter the promo code SPACE80 to get $80 off your first month and show your support for the show. That's Talkspace.com/LockedOnCollege, promo code SPACE80. All right, wrapping things up here in the Locked On UCLA podcast. And hey, UCLA, man, there are some big things coming up. We got spring practice coming up, and UCLA football has already released what's going on. Their first spring practice, I know it's April 1st, no April Fool's Day joke. Bruins practice the 1st, the 3rd, the Saturday. UCLA has practices generally Tuesday, Thursday, once on a Monday. And here are the things DeShaun Foster's bringing back. He's bringing back Friday Night Lights. That's at Drake Stadium. So Friday Night Lights is coming back. Huge for UCLA because that was a big event last year. They have 2 open practices on Saturdays. And then once again, the spring showcase, the spring game, that's May 3rd. So the big dates to remember if you want to attend or you want to know when everybody is going to start buzzing about practice from what they saw in their own point of view. April 1st is the first day of spring practice. April 5th is an open Saturday practice. April 18th, on Friday night, is the Friday Night Lights, where they bring families out, get everybody there, probably some blow-ups, get that, everything hyped up. Friday Night Lights. April 26th, open practice, and I think it says autographs after practice. And then you've got the spring showcase on May 3rd, a Saturday, and it says at the Rose Bowl. So we're bringing back the good old vibes, interacting with the community. We saw an increased support, and that was with limited time for DeShaun Foster. When he was hired in February, mid-February last year, yes, mix in an extra day there with leap day on a leap year. You got one less day this year. You mix in more time to build these events. Can you imagine how much more marketing they're going to put in, how much more hype they're going to put out, how much bigger it can be, or just more entertaining it can be with hopefully a better product, a much simpler offense to implement. You get these players in, understanding the system, put it all together, and hopefully it can look a little bit better than the spring game did last year, where, there were some odd moments, but they showcased some good things. Now with some new players on defense, some revolving doors on offense, this is the time, at least part 1, of what it's going to take for UCLA to build a competitive football team and have some fun events to go watch it. All we wanted, all we proclaimed for UCLA fans, as UCLA fans, was bring back the spring game. Those are some of my memories as a young Bruin fan, going to the Rose Bowl, even in the midst of renovations, going to see the Bruins and getting my little hat signed by Anthony Barr. And next thing you know, he blows up and has one of the biggest, more emphatic sacks of a UCLA player on a USC quarterback in the rivalry's history, in my mind. Of course, that's recency bias. But still, look at all those fun dates, 4 open practices, Friday Night Lights, spring game at the Rose Bowl. Everything's churning in the right direction. Now, can they build through those practices from April 1st to May 3rd? Hopefully. And I cannot wait for UCLA to put up big things in 2025. So I'm glad that they're bringing back the spring showcase for year 2 under DeShaun Foster. And I think he understands UCLA's got to get out to the community and reach to these boosters who are like, we don't want to pay. We don't want to support the AD. We don't want to support this nonsense. We don't want to support the Big Ten. We don't want to support DeShaun Foster. He's already quiet. But the way he makes his voice and his presence and his program louder and bigger and grows it are these events and the support and getting everybody with his team out there to spread the brand. Because that's what UCLA needs to become, a bigger brand as a football program. They are big, but they can get better and bigger with the right support and the right success. And hopefully DeShaun Foster in year 2 can take another step in the right direction to doing that. But until next time, Bruins fans, we'll talk all about it. Any other additions, any from the portal, recruiting, to UCLA basketball, and heck, the UCLA women are about to play Rutgers They're the number 1 team in the country, unbeaten. Get your hands up, Bruins fans. 8 clap time, baby. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. UCLA, fight. This has been Locked on UCLA. Zach signing off. Go Bruins.